Okay, everyone, welcome to Let There Be Light, Edison's domestic lighting distribution system. My name's Tim. I'm a historian here at the Edison and Ford Winter Estates, and I am going to tell the story of Edison's domestic lighting distribution system. Hopefully, there we go. Okay, so from light bulb to power plant, Thomas Edison popularized domestic and commercial lighting around the world. I want to thank Holly Schaefer for her inspiration in doing our digital step into history. She's a supporter of historic research and always an inspirational part of all of our presentations. All the historians here at the museum work on presentations ranging from the history of Fort Myers to the history of the world. So check out our website. Every month we have a different presentation. Now, Edison's Menlo Park, New Jersey laboratory, that's a picture of it right there, was a two-story structure dedicated to scientific experimentation. The lab was completed by the end of March 1875. This was the beginning of Edison expanding his horizons in his experimentation. He had the construction cost over $2,500, and at the time, it was the largest private laboratory in the United States. Edison began to take an interest in electric lighting once he was established in his new laboratory, which allowed him freedom to experiment with several different ideas at one time. Edison began experimenting with electric lighting in 1877. He was inspired by the development of the Jablikoff candle, an arc lighting system using carbon. Edison quickly moved, though, from arc lighting to incandescent lighting. So he wanted to join the race, throw in his hat into the race for developing a safe domestic form of lighting. September 8th, 1878, he visited William Wallace's shop and saw this powerful electric generator known as a telemachon. Amazingly, Edison had been experimenting with light bulbs using batteries. When he saw this telemachon light 8 lamps at one time, this inspired him. Before this visit, he was just using batteries. Now that he saw this, he proclaimed to the world, I have just solved the problem of electric lighting, of the subdivision of the electric light. So just seeing William Wallace's 8 light bulbs, he made a pronouncement to the world through the media that he had solved the problem. Actually, he didn't really solve anything at that time, but he knew that if he pronounced it, that's Edison's method, was making bold statements and then holding himself accountable to actually get the job done. Now, this guy, Grosvenor P. Lowry, counsel for Western Union, was a big fan of Thomas Edison. Now, he knew that Edison would find the answer to this lighting. He had a lot of faith in Thomas Edison. Western Union was a huge financer of Edison's laboratory experiments. The Golden Stock Telegraph Company, a subdivision of their company, actually paid him $35,000 for his golden stock ticker. So Edison was well on his way. So Grosvenor put together the investors to start the Edison Electric Light Company. Initial capital of $300,000 was invested in return for Edison's sweat equity and endless energy, which would guide the research and development of domestic electricity. Edison was to retain half of the capital stock with a $30,000 annual royalty if it proved to be more economical than gas. He actually received $35,000 up front to begin his experiments on electrical light. So Grosvenor, and he put together 13 other investors, including Thomas Edison, and they said, look, we're going to give you this opportunity to light up the world. And Edison jumped on full board. First thing he did, they set up this company. It was called the Edison Electric Light Company, and it was used to raise money for Edison's experiment with the light bulb. The company was incorporated in October of 1878, and that's a picture of their office building in Manhattan, 65 Fifth Avenue, New York. So that was the famous building of the Edison Electric Light Company. And we see this letter from that he received. In this October letter to his European representative, Edison stated his excitement for the electric light, hinting to details in his agreement. Edison said he would retain half of the capital stock with a $30,000 annual royalty if it proved more economical than gas. I already mentioned he received $50,000, so he was very excited. This guy Puskas was his representative in Europe, who was always introducing Edison's. He was over there working on the telephone, actually introducing Edison's patents in the telephone. And Edison let him know now he's going to switch to working with the light bulb. Very important. The Edison Electric Light Company agreement with Thomas Edison was right there. It is in writing. And November 15th, they finally came out with this agreement. And I got this from the Rutgers website. They have all of Edison's business documents located on their website. So this was, as you can see on the 5th there, Edison was to have 200 shares of capital stock in this company. With the new influx of capital, Edison immediately went to work on designing a proper research facility, which included machine works, library, office, and machine shop to accompany his two-story laboratory. So there's a picture of the site in Menlo Park, New Jersey. The brick building on the far left was the brand new library. Then you see his original laboratory in the center. Behind the laboratory was a glass blower house, carpenter shop, and then a machine works where they made generators. So this was the beginning of making electricity commercial. That's an 1880 photograph of Menlo Park, New Jersey. And the staff, this is one of the original staff that worked on this with Thomas Edison. The staff also started doing basic research on properties of the materials they had been working with. This was a tight-knit group. It included John W. Lawson, T. Seymour, J. F. Randolph, George Carman, F. McLaughlin, John Fred Ott, Dr. Haid, Francis Upton, Charles Batchelor, Francis Gell, Martin Force, Alfred Swanson, and Mr. Griffin. Within 1 year, Edison's team was on track to change the trajectory of electric lighting forever. Now, these guys tried thousands of different materials for filaments and light bulbs in this little laboratory. So these were the guys that went to work on it right away. Each one of these men became fairly well off because of their association with Thomas Edison here in the early days. They all bought stock in several different Edison companies, and by the end of their lives, they were pretty wealthy themselves. Francis Upton, a physicist, mathematician and graduate from Bowdoin and Princeton, headed up the research and development phase. Under Mr. Upton's guidance, they started looking at existing patents and research to try and avoid repeating other people's mistakes and also copying other people's patents. As a graduate of Bowdoin, with graduate work at Princeton and in Germany, Upton was the best educated of Edison's assistants. Nicknamed Culture by his colleagues, he worked on the light bulb, the generator, and other projects. So this was Edison's star genius, if you will. He brought him in right away when he knew that they were going to have to modernize their research, and he headed up the team. Francis Upton became very famous through his work with Thomas Edison. Batchelor was an investor, Charles Batchelor, in Edison Manufacturing Enterprises, beginning with the Edison Electric Light Company. In 1878, he was in on the ground floor. He was very involved in developing the light bulb and manufacturing the light bulb. With the Edison Lamp Company, then later he would run the Edison Machine Works. Batchelor managed that until 1888 and the Edison General Electric Company in 1888. Batchelor was the man behind that. He was born in London. He trained as a mechanic. He came to the United States at age 22 and soon joined Edison, becoming his closest associate. Batch, as he was nicknamed, went to Europe in 1881 to promote the Edison system, returning to head up the Edison Machine Works. So he introduced Edison's electric power plants to European countries, which led to Edison's a huge successful business for Edison in Europe. Francis Gell, born in New York City, he had very little schooling. He became an assistant to Edison at Menlo Park and went to Europe in 1882 to promote the Edison system. He returned to help reconstruct the Menlo Park laboratory at Dearborn, Michigan. He started with Edison at a very young age. He was only 18 years old. After finishing school at 18, he went to work in Menlo Park. And of course, he became very famous and well off also. Just through hard work. Some of these men were self-educated. He did study chemistry, so his job with the light bulb was to separate chemicals in plants that would be possible candidates for the filaments that they used. J.F. Ott, skilled machinist, was a key employee of Edison's. Fred Ott had a huge presence even down here in Fort Myers. As a matter of fact, he helped Edison put his power plant together here on our property back in 1886 and 87. So he was a skilled machinist and was very prominent here in Fort Myers. He traveled here with the Edisons quite often down to Fort Myers. He would come ahead of them, pick them up at the train station in the Model T, load their luggage. So he was kind of an all-round man for Thomas Edison. And from the 1870s right up until Edison's death, he was a very close associate of Mr. Edison's. John Randolph began working for Edison at age 15 as a laborer and an errand boy. He became Edison's personal secretary and eventually the treasurer of all Edison's companies, which was quite a few companies. He became very wealthy. Unfortunately, on February 17th, 1908, Mr. Randolph took his own life. And I have the story here. This is a quote from Thomas Edison. John F. Randolph was one of my best friends and one with who I have been identified ever since the Menlo Park days. He started work with me as an office boy and through his ability worked his way into the treasurership of all the Edison companies. His accounts are in absolutely sound condition, and he has always manipulated the finances of our companies in a thoroughly businesslike manner. He was one of the men I most highly prized, both for his business ability and personal qualities. I am convinced that his mad act was due to inherited insanity. His brother died several months ago in the state asylum. for the insane at Trenton, where he was an inmate. I can recall that on one occasion, Mr. Randolph absented himself for 2 weeks from his business with no explanation. And the investigation revealed the fact that there was a taint of insanity in his family. So a tragic story, but he went from a 15-year-old office boy into one of the wealthiest people in New Jersey running Edison's company. So a success story with a tragic end for Mr. Randolph. Now, the rest of the team, here they are, pictures. John Lawson was a chemist. He was known as Basic, and he was there. He oversaw the search for platinum by assaying the samples of ore that were brought in for possible content. Platinum was the considered material for the light bulb. It was also the preferred material in the beginning. You see Dr. Haid there. He was a German-born chemist, received any ores determined to contain precious metals as identified by Lawson, affectionately called Doc by Edison and his team. James Seymour was a laboratory assistant who worked on telephones, including the Egan contract and electric light. Alfred Swanson served as a night watchman, ran the steam engine, and made carbon buttons. Stockton Griffin was Edison's secretary and telegraph operator. So Mr. Griffin knew Edison back from their telegraphy days during the Civil War. All of these men here were a very intricate part of developing electric light as we know it today. Without this tight-knit group of people, it could have been many more years until we realized electricity in our homes. So by no means did Edison do this electric light bulb on his own. He had a lot of help from some very ambitious and smart people. Okay, so now where did all these people stay? Edison chose Menlo Park, which was about 15 miles south of Newark, to get out of the city. He had several mechanic shops in Newark. He was working for Western Union, and he took some of that windfall and moved his operation out into the country of Menlo Park. They stayed at Sarah Jordan's boarding house. She offered room and board for all the unmarried employees. Mary Edison's father's stepdaughter from a previous marriage. So Edison kind of knew her, his wife's father's stepdaughter. They were friendly with the Edisons. She opened this boarding house. The house also played host to the experimental lighting system that was installed in Menlo Park in 1879. Now, Mrs. Jordan's house, as well as Mr. Bachelor's, were lit for people to see, along with Edison's laboratory and personal home. Here's a map of Menlo Park, New Jersey. This was the famous spot where the light bulb was developed. I would say invented, but we're going to go with developed because Edison developed. A lot of people were trying to work on an incandescent light that would work. Edison was the first to succeed and the one to make it popular. Now, Edison's Menlo Park laboratory was literally 200 yards from the train depot in Menlo Park. It was just a little speck of a town that had failed. They were trying to make a big development there, but no one wanted to live there. So Edison decided that would be a great place to make shop out in the quiet of the country. His home was just a block away, and Sarah Jordan's home also. This is a picture taken from the side of the laboratory, and it shows the entire length of Christie Street. So you got the brick library, then you have Sarah Jordan's house. Edison's house is all the way down on the end. Okay, back to the light bulb. This is an 1880 picture of the porch. You can see Edison's team has now gotten a little bit bigger. They knew they had the light bulb, and now they needed more people to make this happen. Now, very important day in this whole process was on October 16th, 1879. Edison successfully lit a light bulb for more than 13 hours, convincing his crew that indoor lighting would be realized commercially. A lot of these guys were getting very frustrated. They keep making these light bulbs. They're blowing up. They're catching on fire. They're only staying lit for 5 minutes at a time. They finally get a light bulb to glow for 13 hours. And they carbonized paper to do this. It was just a carbonized piece of paper. Actually, it was a cotton thread that they carbonized, excuse me. And then after several more experiments, before the month was over, we sat and watched it with anxiety growing into elation. This is a direct quote from Edison. It lasted about 45 hours. And then I said, if it will burn that number of hours now, I can make it burn 100. So now they knew they had a light bulb that wasn't going to burn out for hundreds of hours. The possibility was there. So the team was inspired by this day in October, and they would go on to develop an entire system. What good's a light bulb if you don't have electricity? You have to figure out a way to sell it to millions of people. How are they going to make money off of this new discovery? Well, the first thing they did was they developed a generator, and this in the machine shop behind the Menlo Park laboratory. There's a picture of it right there. It's called a long-legged Marianne. This machine shop was to the generator of what the laboratory was to the light bulb. By midsummer of 1879, the machine shop had completed their first generator that would be used for an upcoming demonstration of a new central power plant to be activated in Menlo Park. The generator, known as the Long-Legged Marianne, featured two iron magnets, 54 inches in height, weighing 1,100 pounds apiece. Scientific American deemed it the largest that had ever been made up to that time. So we have a generator very similar to this in our museum. These iron generators created a magnetic field as the iron wrapped copper would create the magnetism that's used for electricity. You can see the brushes down on the lower right-hand side. So that leads us to December 31st, 1879. This was a huge event in Menlo Park, New Jersey. The system of distribution would be displayed for the world to see in the tiny hamlet of Menlo Park, New Jersey. Streetlights glowed from the train depot to the laboratory as people shuffled in amazement at the new glow of incandescence. A new kind of light, not a gas light with kerosene or natural gas. This was clean burning, no more soot on your wall. People got off the train in Menlo Park on New Year's Eve and walked. They saw Sarah Jordan's house all lit up with light bulbs, Thomas Edison's house all lit up with light bulbs, the laboratory, the machine works, Charles Batchelor's house all lit up with light bulbs for the very first time. This was happening to an entire town being lit up with lights. So this was a big deal. And of course, that made electricity popular. One of the most historical nights in electrical lighting. By 1880, Edison's crew had expanded. These men were excited to be a part of making history. There they are, the group of about 20 of them there. Some of them from the very first picture I showed you, still hanging around, still being a part of Edison's team. Very tight-knit group. Now, by 1880, or after his successful New Year's Eve demonstration, Edison knew it was time to expand. The Edison Lamp Works in Menlo Park, New Jersey, was created to fund the manufacture of lights. This building was originally used to manufacture electric pens, one of Edison's previous inventions. So they converted the electric pen factory into a light bulb factory. And you can see there's a crew of about 100 men that worked in that. Pretty amazing picture there. I love this picture. I'm going to thank the Henry Ford Museum for this picture. Now, Edison, of course, knowing it was going to expand, The factory started churning out light bulbs midsummer by 1880. So that was an amazing factory there. And then Edison's Machine Works on Gorg Street, New York. This company was established as a partnership around 1881. It manufactured dynamos and electric motors for the Edison electric light system. So that little machine works he had in Menlo Park wasn't going to be enough. People were starting to order generators left and right. Edison began to sell his electricity around the country, so they opened up this machine works in Manhattan. The partnership became a corporation in 1884. Near the end of 1885, the company absorbed the Electric Tube Company and the Edison Shafting Manufacturing Company. A year later, it moved its factory from Gorg Street in New York City to Schenectady, New York. The company merged with several other Edison companies in 1889 to become the Edison General Electric Company. So Edison's company, they were making everything from light bulb to the socket that you screwed the bulb into, the power plants, the wiring, everything in between. Edison's company was now involved in making. And there's a picture of the Schenectady, New York plant as it expanded into this huge operation. You can see the Edison Machine Works brochure there with a picture of one of their dynamo generators. And then the Edison Lamp Company, well, that expanded also, and they had to move that factory from Menlo Park to Newark, New Jersey. In December of 1880, a breakthrough in the incandescent lamp came with the carbonization of the bamboo filament. Bulbs now are capable of hundreds of hours of incandescent glow. Edison's expanded lab and manufacturing staff were able to design everything from plant to building. 1880 notebook entries stating from Charles Batchelor here that bamboo would be the preferred filament material. Edison spent almost a year trying to develop a platinum filament for his lamp. The material would not burn up in air, but making it give light without melting proved difficult. Eventually, Edison returned to experimenting with carbon filaments, and he and his team baked hundreds of materials before settling on bamboo for their commercial product. The choice of materials is no less important today. Modern inventors simply have many more possibilities to choose from due to the great number of artificial materials available a century ago. So this was a major breakthrough in the light bulb, bamboo filament. And there's Batchelor's memo to the company. You can see that they're going to make bamboo filaments from here on out. It says the lamps made for laboratory from this date will be bamboo. Okay, so a new company was organized in 1881 as a partnership between Sigmund Bergman and Edward H. Johnson. It manufactured electric lighting fixtures, sockets, and devices used with the Edison system of electric lighting. Edison joined the partnership in September of 1882, and this company would make any type of lighting fixture needed. They also made outlets to plug lights into. Edison moved his personal laboratory from Menlo Park to the top floor of the electrical equipment manufacturer. You see a picture of it there. Bergman and Company's building at the corner of 17th Street and Avenue B. At this time, he was a partner in the firm. The research facility at Bergman's would be Edison's principal laboratory for the next 4 years. Edison focused the work of his new laboratory on experiments related to his electric light and power system, especially extending the life of incandescent lamps. So Edison always wanting his light bulbs to burn longer. This was a big selling point for his light bulbs over everyone else's. Edison would devote the large expense of the Pearl Street station also led to Edison to devote the early months of 1883 to determining how best to drive down the costs of his electric lighting system in order to promote its use in towns and cities across the United States. Bergman was a longtime friend and business partner of Edison's, and he had an exclusive agreement to make fixtures for Edison's lamps. The Edison incandescent lamp brochure. So they would send these brochures out to companies and cities around the world to convince people of the not just the beauty, but the utility of the electric lamp. The Edison Electric Light Company quickly began to commercialize their ideas by publishing brochures like this one, which included product options and specific cost analysis. And you can look at all these brochures on the Rutgers website. Now, let's get to the Edison Company for isolated lighting. The brochure for the isolated lighting company included everything needed from generator to light bulb to power up a home and factory. This company originated to sell electricity before they had the central power plants. It began operating as a separate company in 1881. The company sold small generating plants for lighting of individual homes, factories, and businesses as a way of promoting electric lighting. And there's a look at their prices. This was their brochure. And there's the long leg Marianne. By now it's called Edison's Z Dynamo. The first one was installed September 28, 1881 for James Harrison's woolen mill, by far the most popular. A complete system could be installed for $1,595. So you could install your own electric system in your factory for under $2,000. On September 4th, 1882, Edison's first central station, the Pearl Street Station, opened at 257 Pearl Street in Manhattan. The station was the first commercial power plant in the United States. Now, there's a look at the K Dynamo. By the way, J.P. Morgan bought this K Dynamo and powered up his personal home with it. We have one of these in our museum. Looks exactly like that. The K Dynamo, it came out in 1882. That thing weighs 8,000 pounds, and the entire system setup would cost you just under $4,000. So this was a very expensive generator, but also very popular. Here's a look at the first central lighting station in New York, the Edison Electric Lighting Station in 1882. I got this picture from an article of Scientific American. The Pearl Street Power Station lit up a square mile of lower Manhattan and convinced the world that electric lights would be replacing gas lighting. This is the sole surviving generator from the Pearl Street Power Station. It caught on fire in 1889. Let me get that straight. Sorry about that. Yes, 1890 was the end of the Pearl Street Station. The plant burned down on January 2nd, 1890. While 6 dynamos could supply up to 7,200 lamps, there were only some 85 customers, having a total of 400 lamps on the first day of operation. That's the sole surviving generator there from the fire. There's a actual picture of it right after the fire. This generator was called the Jumbo Dynamo, and this is it in its original setting. This picture came from the Henry Ford Museum. Henry Ford got his hands on that generator and moved it up to Michigan, cleaned it all up, and made it look like brand new, and it sits up there till this day. So if you can look at one of Edison's original Jumbo Dynamo generators up in Michigan at the Henry Ford Museum. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's another picture of what these dynamos looked like. After founding his own company in England, Edison merged with Swan. They had a legal battle, and Edison convinced Mr. Swan that it was time for their companies to merge, and they started the Edison and Swan United Electric Company in England. After founding his own company, Swan found himself sued by Edison for patent infringement. Eventually, the two inventors decided to stop fighting and join forces. The company they formed, the Edison Swan United, became one of the world's largest manufacturers of light bulbs. So Edison took his show on the road. He made light bulbs over in Europe. He built power plants all across Europe. As a matter of fact, you see the Edison International Electric Companies right there. So Edison's idea of domestic and commercial electric systems became popular around the world, while experimenting with advancements continued in the laboratory. Edison started 17 different electric companies on 3 continents during the 1880s, proving to the world that electric lighting would dominate across the world in the 20th century and beyond, and now into the 21st century. So Edison, one of the most important figures in electric lighting, because he was the person that was able to commercialize it first. And he jumped on that. And during the 1880s and 1890s, Edison made electricity popular around the world. Today, we all realize very few people would even want to live without electricity. If you can imagine waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to flick that switch and find your way to the restroom, you're going to be in trouble if you have to light a candle these days. So I'm very grateful that Holly gave me the opportunity. That's the story of how it all began. And there's much more to this story than I could ever tell in this amount of time. So there's the sources that I used, and any one of those sources, you can get many more details about Edison's electric light. But there is no doubt that without Thomas Edison's impact on the electrical business and the capitalization of his ideas, that we would probably be about 40 more years behind in our electricity. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. Okay, have a great day. Thanks, Maxine. We'll talk to you later.